Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're pulling back the curtain on something that often gets a reputation for being, well, a bit dry: global trade agreements.
Yeah. Tariffs, quotas. Sounds like bedtime reading, right?
Exactly. But I promise you, when you delve deeper, these aren't just about technicalities. Oh, no.
Not at all.
These are incredibly dynamic arenas, vibrant battlegrounds where national interests clash, power is asserted.
And the future of entire economies, even societies, is shaped in ways you might not immediately realize. It's fascinating stuff, actually.
That's absolutely right. What might appear on the surface as straightforward economic negotiations can, upon closer inspection, reveal layers of complex geopolitical maneuvering.
Deep-seated historical dependencies, and even a profound redefinition of global hierarchies. We're talking not just about what is traded, but crucially, who gets to dictate the terms and why.
And that's exactly what we aim to do here on the deep dive. We take that intricate, often dense information and distill it into clear, engaging insights.
Trying to give you that shortcut to being truly well-informed.
Equipped with understanding that goes beyond the headlines. Today, we're plunging deep into the recent trade agreement between the United States and the European Union.
A really significant one.
It's a deal that has been starkly described by international observer Mookie Tenenbaum as largely unilateral.
Unilateral, yes, implying Europe truly didn't choose the menu, as he put it.
That's a strong phrase.
It is. And Tenenbaum's sharp analytical framework will be our compass for this deep dive. His insights, they cut right to the core of these power dynamics.
Illuminating the true forces at play behind what, at first glance, might seem like a standard trade pact.
Exactly. Through his lens, we'll uncover Europe's deep-seated vulnerabilities, the historical concessions that set the stage, and the bold new geopolitical strategy now unfolding.
So what does this all mean for you? Over the next while, we'll unpack the specific terms of this agreement, explore the surprisingly candid reactions from European leaders,
Some were very candid.
and understand why Europe appeared to have so little leverage in these negotiations. We'll also trace the fascinating historical context that led us to this point.
Because as Tenenbaum emphasizes, this isn't just about the present, it's the culmination of decades of intertwined history. You really need that background.
Absolutely. And finally, we'll examine the potential ripple effects on everything from the cars you might buy to the profits of major pharmaceutical companies.
Big pharma, yeah, that's a key one.
And even the very fabric of social spending in Europe. Get ready for some serious aha moments that will reshape your understanding of global power.
Our mission today is for you to walk away understanding not just what transpired, but critically, why it matters and what these shifts imply for the future of global power dynamics for years to come.
Okay, let's begin by setting the scene for this US-EU agreement, which came together right at the end of July.
That's right.
What's particularly illuminating, as Tenenbaum points out, is that just prior to this, there was a significant and very public movement regarding U.S. commercial relations with Brazil.
Ah, yes, the Brazil situation.
This, it turns out, set a crucial precedent for Europe.
It's fascinating how the Brazil situation served as a real-time, well, almost a dress rehearsal for the United States negotiation posture.
A dress rehearsal, good way to put it.
Tenenbaum's analysis reveals that the U.S. had imposed staggering 50% tariffs on nearly all Brazilian products.
50%, that's huge.
Huge. The only exceptions were for goods the U.S. specifically required, like certain rare earth minerals or particular agricultural commodities they couldn't easily source elsewhere.
So not a broad negotiation, more like a list of demands.
Exactly. It immediately signaled a highly selective and needs-based approach from the American side, rather than a broad reciprocal trade negotiation.
And Brazil's President Lula's initial public response to these tariffs was quite telling, wasn't it? He declared that Brazil would negotiate, explain, and convince the U.S. not to implement these sanctions.
Right, he sounded quite defiant initially.
He was even given a week before these severe tariffs would kick in, which might sound like a window for genuine dialogue.
You'd think so.
But what did Tenenbaum observe about the ultimate outcome? Did Brazil manage to sway the American position?
Well, that's where Tenenbaum's insights truly come into play. What we saw in Brazil was a stark demonstration of the U.S. negotiation posture.
Which was?
Lula ultimately understood he simply didn't hold the cards. Despite his public bravado and calls for negotiation, the reality was that the U.S., under Trump, dictated the terms.
So the negotiation wasn't really a negotiation.
Not in the traditional sense. This experience solidified a pattern where the U.S. expected compliance rather than prolonged bilateral negotiation, effectively presenting a non-negotiable set of demands.
A take it or leave it situation.
Pretty much. It was a crucial prelude, suggesting that Europe, too, might find itself facing a similar situation rather than a negotiation among equals.
This brings us directly to a concept Tenenbaum had introduced even earlier, about a year ago, which is now coming sharply into focus.
Ah, the vassal states idea.
The idea of European nations effectively becoming vassal states to the United States, quite a provocative term.
It is provocative. And when we connect this to the broader geopolitical landscape, the vassal state concept isn't about political subjugation in the medieval sense, obviously.
Right, not like knights and lords.
No, but rather a profound economic and strategic dependency. Tenenbaum identifies Europe's fundamental reliance on U.S. defense as the primary driver behind this dynamic.
Defense is number one.
Absolutely. Europe, particularly post-Cold War, has increasingly relied on the United States for its security umbrella. And secondarily, the U.S. serves as an indispensable commercial partner,
The biggest market.
the world's largest and most dynamic consumer market. Without these two pillars, defense and market access, Europe's strategic and economic standing would be fundamentally undermined.
So, given that deep-seated, almost existential reliance, Tenenbaum's observation was that the U.S. would inevitably demand its pound of flesh.
His words, yeah.
Meaning, European countries would effectively have to bend the knee and acknowledge U.S. dominance in this new global order. It's a very vivid image, isn't it?
It really is.
It frames these recent trade talks not merely as economic discussions, but as acknowledgments of a shifting power dynamic, a rebalancing of historical obligations.
That imagery, which Tenenbaum employs, is quite stark, and it certainly sets the tone for how the agreement itself was received across Europe.
Right, let's talk about those reactions.
When the U.S.-EU agreement was formally signed, and it's important to remember that full details are still emerging even as the deal is ratified,
Still murky in places.
the reactions from European leaders were incredibly illuminating, often betraying a sense of resignation rather than celebration.
The public statements were truly revealing. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen appeared on television right alongside Trump at the signing.
A striking visual.
And Tenenbaum notes that she directly acknowledged the relationship was unbalanced.
Openly admitted it.
She even went so far as to say, and I quote, "This was the best we could get. It could have been worse."
Wow. Coming from the head of the European Union's executive body, that's an incredibly candid admission, isn't it?
Astonishing, really.
Tenenbaum interpreted this as a representative of vassal states speaking, highlighting the lack of leverage. Her statement was less about a triumph of negotiation and more about a constrained acceptance of terms.
And the responses from other European leaders, while varied, largely echoed the sentiment of reluctant realism, didn't they?
They did. Germany, for instance, a major economic powerhouse within the EU, was reportedly quite content that things went relatively smoothly.
Content. Sounds more like relief.
Exactly. A sigh of relief, perhaps, that the outcome wasn't more punitive rather than enthusiastic approval for a truly equitable deal. They seem to have prioritized stability over a more favorable but potentially elusive agreement.
Then you have Spain, which simply stated, "It's what we could get." It's almost a shrug, isn't it?
Yeah, like what can you do? A pragmatic acknowledgement of limited options, a feeling of being dealt a hand they simply had to play.
But in sharp contrast, France. Well, France was different.
France. Always keen to assert its independence and protect its national interests. They called the agreement a disaster and a surrender to the United States.
Very strong language.
It immediately highlights the significant disunity within Europe, not just on the terms themselves, but on how to perceive and respond to this new power dynamic. Such divergent reactions signal deep internal friction.
And this raises a crucial question that Tenenbaum emphasizes. Despite the signing, is this deal truly set in stone?
Good question. Because he stresses that the agreement still faces significant bureaucratic and political hurdles.
Okay, like what?
For one, it needs ratification by the U.S. Senate. Given that Trump currently holds a majority there, this particular hurdle is generally seen as not a problem for the U.S. side. Relatively straightforward.
But here's where it gets particularly precarious for Europe, right?
Exactly. The agreement critically requires ratification by all 27 European Union parliaments.
All 27. National parliaments.
Yes, national parliaments. Just one no vote from any of these, or even a regional parliament with sufficient power in some countries, can cause the entire agreement to collapse.
That's an immense hurdle, especially when you consider those diverse and often conflicting national reactions we just discussed.
Each country has its own specific economic interests, political sensitivities, farmers protesting, unions objecting. It could derail the entire process.
Has this happened before?
Tenenbaum highlights that this is not an unprecedented scenario. He reminds us of past international agreements that have fallen through due to precisely this mechanism of national vetoes.
Oh, yeah.
He specifically recalls a referendum in the Netherlands that rejected an accord, and the Irish Parliament's rejection of another significant international agreement.
So these aren't just technicalities. They represent real and present dangers for the full implementation of this US-EU deal.
Absolutely. It means the agreement still faces a significant bureaucratic and, more importantly, a deeply political journey. Its full and stable implementation is far from a certainty. The road ahead is riddled with potential pitfalls.
So let's delve into the core substance of this agreement. The menu, as Tenenbaum provocatively phrases it, that Europe didn't get to choose.
Right, the actual terms.
And the first, most striking element he points to is the profoundly unilateral tariff structure.
Unilateral is the word. A core point to understand about this agreement, from Tenenbaum's analysis, is its entirely unidirectional tariff application.
Meaning?
Essentially, there's a blanket 15% tariff imposed on virtually all European products entering the United States.
15% on almost everything from Europe.
Almost everything. So if you're a European company, whether you're selling high-end cars, specialized machinery, or gourmet food products, you're automatically paying an additional 15% at the U.S. border.
That's a big hit to competitiveness.
A huge impact on pricing and competitiveness for European exporters. But then, on the flip side,
American products entering Europe.
zero tariffs.
Zero. Wow. It's a stark, almost unheard of contrast in major trade agreements, isn't it? A truly one-way flow of tariffs.
It is indeed. Now, it's important to note there are some very specific exemptions from this 15% tariff.
Ah, okay. Strategic exemption.
Highly strategic from the U.S. perspective. Products like cutting-edge semiconductors and advanced chips.
Things the U.S. needs.
Exactly. Including the critical ASML machines from the Netherlands, which are absolutely essential for global chip manufacturing. Those are exempt. Why? Because the U.S. needs them for its own technological advancement and supply chain security.
So it reveals the tariffs aren't just punishment, they're targeted.
Precisely. Strategically calibrated. It's also worth noting that steel and aluminum are treated separately. They face a much higher 50% tariff.
50% still.
Still, suggesting a different, perhaps more punitive consideration given their historical importance in trade disputes.
So from the American perspective, how is this 15% tariff justified? How do they spin it?
Well, Tenenbaum explains that the U.S. argues this tariff essentially balances out the value-added tax, or VAT, that consumption tax common in Europe, or similar sales taxes that European nations impose.
Ah, the VAT argument.
Their claim is that European products were historically sold, say, 15–25% cheaper in the U.S. because they weren't subjected to an equivalent consumption tax upon import, while American goods did face Europe's VAT when sold there.
So they say it's just leveling the playing field.
Exactly. From the American viewpoint, this 15% tariff is simply an equalization, aiming to level the playing field. Whether that holds up economically is another debate, but that's the justification.
Okay, so beyond tariffs, Europe also made significant market opening commitments, right? Especially in areas tough for the U.S. before.
Yes. Tenenbaum emphasizes that Europe committed to abolishing its extremely tough bureaucratic quality standards.
The famous non-tariff barriers.
That have long acted as such, effectively preventing many U.S. agricultural products from entering their markets. These standards often related to things like genetically altered crops, specific pesticide residue limits,
GMOs and things like that.
or a very long list of particular requirements for food processing and animal welfare that U.S. producers simply weren't set up to meet or found economically unfeasible to comply with.
And it wasn't just agriculture, was it? Cars, too.
Cars, too. Europe also committed to abolishing rules that had previously blocked many U.S. cars. Apparently, American cars, particularly popular models, often didn't meet specific European design or safety standards.
Like headlights or bumpers.
Things like headlight configurations, bumper heights, or even emission standards that Japanese and Chinese manufacturers had adapted their production lines to meet.
But U.S. automakers hadn't or wouldn't.
Largely no. So now American cars are expected to get a much freer pass into the lucrative European auto market.
Okay. Tariffs, market access. Then we arrive at what Tenenbaum describes as the truly massive European investment commitments.
Mass is the word. Some he stresses are gigantic.
How gigantic?
Europe has committed to investing an astonishing $750 billion in the United States.
750 billion.
Billion with a B. And this figure, initially set at $600 billion, actually increased during the negotiations, underscoring the pressure on Europe.
Wow. That's an astronomical figure. To put that into perspective, it's equivalent to about a third of Germany's annual GDP, or roughly the entire annual budget of a major European economy like Spain.
It's huge. And on top of that,
There's more.
Europe committed to buying $250 billion worth of U.S. energy, that's petroleum and gas, per year.
Per year, that's not a one-off.
No, an ongoing annual commitment.
250 billion a year in energy.
To fully grasp the scale of that energy commitment, Tenenbaum points out that Europe currently buys only about $75 billion worth of energy annually from the U.S.
75 billion now to 250 billion.
So this new commitment represents a more than threefold increase in annual energy purchases. That's a monumental shift in supply chains and energy strategy, a core component of this agreement, according to Tenenbaum's assessment.
So if you were to summarize the tangible gains and losses from Europe's perspective under this agreement, Tenenbaum is quite direct, isn't it?
Very direct. He stresses that Europe receives absolutely nothing concrete from this agreement beyond theoretical access to American markets,
Theoretical access.
for which they must still pay that very significant 15% tariff. It truly sounds like a remarkably unbalanced deal based on his analysis.
Okay, absolutely nothing in return. That paints a stark picture.
It absolutely paints a picture of very little reciprocal benefit flowing back to Europe in the immediate terms of this specific agreement.
Which leads us to what Tenenbaum identifies as Europe's overarching Achilles heel.
Yes, this deeper systemic vulnerability that he argues has been fundamentally misunderstood in the popular narrative.
Ah, the famous Greek myth of Achilles, the nearly invulnerable warrior, legendary for his single weak point.
Right, the heel.
The common perception, as Tenenbaum notes, might be that Trump merely discovered Europe's Achilles heel, implying Europe was otherwise robust and strong.
Like it was just one specific weakness.
But Tenenbaum's counter to that interpretation is quite striking, almost provocative.
He challenges the very premise, arguing that Europe was never truly invulnerable. It's not Achilles with a single weak spot.
So not just the heel.
Instead, in his provocative framing, all of Europe is the Achilles heel.
The whole thing.
The whole thing. This implies a pervasive, systemic vulnerability, not just a singular defect. He explains that Achilles, in the myth, was invulnerable except for the heel where his mother held him when she dipped him in the magical river Styx.
A single error took him down.
Right. But for Europe, Tenenbaum suggests the vulnerabilities aren't isolated. They are woven into the very fabric of its existence and its relationship with the United States.
So what are these widespread systemic vulnerabilities that Tenenbaum identifies? He zeroes in on Europe's three core desperations.
Three main ones.
Sure.
First, and perhaps most critically, is defense.
We mentioned that earlier.
Europe is desperate for U.S. defense. He unequivocally states that if the U.S. were to withdraw its military support, Europe would face an immediate and profound crisis.
Why? Because of Russia.
Because Russia would perceive an open door, sensing an opportunity to exert greater influence or even aggressive action. Europeans, particularly those on the eastern flank, deeply fear this scenario, viewing U.S. military presence as vital for regional stability.
It's a real fear, not just theoretical.
Absolutely. That fear isn't abstract. It's a strategic reality rooted in historical memory and ongoing geopolitical tensions.
Okay, defense is number one. What's the second desperation?
The second desperation identified by Tenenbaum is artificial intelligence, AI.
Ah, the tech angle.
The U.S. is unequivocally the dominant global power in AI research, development, and application. Tenenbaum warns that if the U.S. were to adopt a tough stance, perhaps by limiting access to cutting-edge AI models, essential algorithms, or even the underlying computing infrastructure,
Which they could easily do.
Europe faces the crippling prospect of being cut off from critical AI technologies. These are rapidly becoming indispensable for every aspect of modern economies.
Everything from healthcare to factories.
From healthcare to manufacturing to national security, and falling behind in AI would condemn Europe to technological obsolescence. It's a huge vulnerability.
Defense, AI, what's the third?
And the third desperation, one that directly impacts economic prosperity, access to the U.S. market.
Right, the money.
The American market remains the largest and most affluent consumer market in the world. Tenenbaum emphasizes that losing access to it or facing prohibitively high tariffs like the original 30% that made entry virtually impossible, or even the current 15%, would be absolutely devastating for European economies.
Because European industries rely so heavily on U.S. buyers.
Exactly. Industries from luxury goods to machinery, they rely heavily on American consumers. Losing that pipeline or having it severely restricted could trigger widespread economic hardship, plant closures, and job losses across the continent. It really highlights just how interconnected and dependent the global economy has become.
And there's another factor too, right? An internal European one.
Furthermore, Tenenbaum points out a crucial internal weakness. The 27 European countries often don't get along very well.
That's putting it mildly sometimes.
Despite the veneer of unity, deep-seated historical rivalries, divergent national interests, and different economic priorities frequently lead to internal disunity.
Which weakens their negotiating position.
Significantly, this fragmentation significantly exacerbates their vulnerabilities when they are forced to negotiate with a unified front like the United States, effectively weakening their collective bargaining power and making it easier for the stronger party to dictate terms. They present a less cohesive front than, say, a single nation.
So, how did this massive imbalance in trade relations and geopolitical leverage arise in the first place? It wasn't overnight.
No, definitely not.
Tenenbaum gives us a fascinating historical reckoning, stretching back decades. He points out that even when Donald Trump first won the presidency in 2016, he immediately imposed what were then relatively modest 4% tariffs on Europe.
No percent, yeah. Even then, he recognized and openly critiqued the existing trade imbalance. He was talking about it back then.
But Tenenbaum notes a significant evolution in Trump's approach between his first and second terms.
A big change. He describes Trump as much less strong at that time, primarily focused on getting elected, and lacking the necessary people, the efficient and loyal staff, to manage affairs as effectively as he might have wished.
So, less organized first time around.
Perhaps. This time, however, Tenenbaum asserts that Trump came very prepared, having cultivated a team capable of executing a far more calculated and formidable strategy. This contrast indicates a shift from initial broad strokes to a precise and relentless application of leverage.
Okay, let's go deeper into the history. Post-World War II.
Here's where the history lesson truly deepens, going all the way back to the post-World War II context. After the devastation of WWII, Europe was economically crippled,
Utterly devastated.
facing widespread poverty and destruction. The U.S., through initiatives like the Marshall Plan, provided massive financial aid for reconstruction. We all know that part.
Carried the Marshall Plan.
The Tenenbaum reveals a lesser-known yet crucial aspect of that recovery. To help Europe rebuild its industries and revive its economies, the U.S. allowed European goods to export freely to the American market without tariffs.
Free access for Europe.
Yes, and critically, even permitted European nations to impose tariffs on American exports.
Wow. So Europe could tax U.S. goods, but the U.S. didn't tax European goods.
Exactly. It was a deliberate and asymmetric trade policy designed for recovery.
And this wasn't just charity, Tenenbaum says.
No, this wasn't merely an act of economic charity from the U.S. It was a profound strategic imperative. The U.S. leadership at the time understood they could not afford to let Europe remain weak and economically fragile.
Why? The Cold War.
Precisely. A strong, economically recovered Europe was deemed essential as a bulwark against the looming threat of the Soviet Union and the burgeoning Warsaw Pact.
Which included places like Poland, East Germany.
Ukraine, Belarus, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Poland, and East Germany, yes. Strengthening Europe economically was seen as a vital component of containing Soviet influence and preventing the spread of communism across the continent.
So this incredibly favorable trade situation for Europe, born out of post-war necessity, it didn't just end with the Cold War.
According to Tenenbaum, no.
Right.
After the Berlin Wall fell in 1990, Europe embarked on a costly and complex reunification process, particularly for Germany integrating East Germany.
Which kept them busy internally.
Right. The U.S., Tenenbaum suggests, found this convenient, as a unified but internally occupied Europe posed less of an immediate economic challenge. So the historical trade concessions largely continued, allowing Europe to maintain its significant trade surpluses.
And Europe got used to this favorable setup.
Tenenbaum's analysis suggests that as the years progressed into the 2000s, Europe, which had steadily unified from a purely economic union in 1956,
Coal and steel community, then the EU.
starting with the European Coal and Steel Community. then expanding into a small economic EU and eventually transforming into a robust politico-economic union, became quite shameless in exploiting these deeply favorable trade terms.
Shameless. Strong word again.
His word. They enjoyed a persistent and substantial trade surplus with the U.S., becoming increasingly reliant on this advantageous arrangement without feeling the need for genuine reciprocity.
And the U.S. just let it happen.
And the U.S., Tenenbaum suggests, largely looked the other way. They were preoccupied by other pressing global events, notably the September 11th attacks
Yeah.
and the subsequent decade of wars in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Yeah.
It was a period where the U.S. was significantly distracted by geopolitical crises, allowing Europe to continue benefiting from these historical trade concessions without much scrutiny or demand for rebalancing.
Until Trump returned.
But this historical deferment of U.S. economic interests, according to Tenenbaum, definitively terminated with Trump's return to power.
The party's over.
And he emphatically states that this process of rebalancing and extraction is not over yet, implying further demands and shifts are still to come.
So if the party of easy trade terms is truly over for Europe, what does Tenenbaum identify as the most interesting and perhaps most consequential aspects of this new agreement beyond the immediate tariffs?
Beyond the tariffs, he points directly to Europe's promises to invest massive sums in the U.S.
The $750 billion.
and to drastically increase their purchases of U.S. energy, the $250 billion a year.
Okay, let's unpack that $750 billion investment commitment first. Where does Tenenbaum think that money is actually going?
He strongly suggests that this colossal investment will primarily be funneled into buying arms and military equipment from the United States.
So defense spending, essentially.
Pretty much. These aren't just commercial decisions. Such purchases are typically made by countries themselves or by companies with explicit government approval and funding, often linked directly to defense budgets.
And if this commitment is actually fulfilled, the implications for Europe's own industrial base would be quite stark, wouldn't they? What happens to European defense companies?
Tenenbaum believes it would effectively kill Europe's domestic arms industry.
Kill it.
That's his assessment. This means ending their long-held aspirations for strategic self-sufficiency in defense, forcing them to become more dependent on the U.S. for their military hardware. We're talking about potentially stifling innovation and production from major European defense contractors, eroding a critical part of their industrial base.
So much for European strategic autonomy.
Exactly. And what's particularly fascinating here is the geopolitical ripple effect beyond Europe. Even Israel's robust arms industry, which currently sells advanced defense systems to Germany and other European nations,
They sell a lot to Europe?
would face direct competition from these mandated U.S. purchases. This highlights how far-reaching these agreements can be.
Any other interesting exemptions or side deals?
Well, on a related note, Tenenbaum points out that Brazil's Embraer, a major aircraft manufacturer, curiously has its aircraft specifically exempted from U.S. tariffs,
Oh, why?
indicating particular U.S. strategic interests in certain sectors and relationships that extend beyond simply Europe. It's never just one simple story.
Right. Now let's turn to the energy purchases. That staggering commitment of $250 billion annually.
The big one.
Tenenbaum characterizes this as the most challenging commitment within the entire agreement, and even more provocatively argues that it is impossible for Europe to fully fulfill.
Impossible. That's a strong claim.
Why such a strong claim? What's the logic?
Well, it raises fundamental questions about the practicalities of intergovernmental agreements impacting private sector operations. Energy is purchased by companies, not countries.
Right. Utilities, factories.
We're talking about massive utilities and industrial consumers like Electricité de France, Germany's E.ON, or various chemical and steel producers across Europe. These are private or semi-private entities.
And they still buy Russian gas, don't they? Even now.
Even amidst the ongoing war in Ukraine and the geopolitical tensions with Russia, many European companies continue to buy natural gas from Russia, simply because it remains the most economically viable option for them. It's cheaper.
And that's a crucial point, isn't it? Price.
Absolutely. Tenenbaum emphasizes that U.S. energy, whether it's liquefied natural gas, LNG, or crude oil, is much more expensive than Russian energy, even factoring in the current geopolitical landscape.
So why would a company choose the more expensive option?
Exactly. If the boards and shareholders of these massive European energy companies make purchasing decisions primarily based on economic factors like price, long-term contracts, and reliability, why would they willingly choose a significantly more expensive option simply because of an intergovernmental agreement? It runs contrary to their fiduciary duties.
So Tenenbaum thinks Trump knows this commitment is shaky.
Tenenbaum believes that Trump is fully aware these energy commitments are unlikely to materialize as agreed upon, at least not in their full scope or within the expected time frame.
Which leads to his prediction of Trump's anticipated response to European noncompliance. What does he think will happen?
He outlines two potential paths forward, one more severe than the other.
Okay, path one.
The first path Tenenbaum suggests is that Trump could simply revert to higher tariffs, perhaps back to the original 30%, declaring, "You didn't fulfill the energy part of the agreement," a direct economic punitive measure.
Simple, direct punishment. What's path two?
The second path, which Tenenbaum believes is far more likely and strategically potent, is that Trump will demand direct monetary compensation.
Monetary compensation? How?
He believes Trump will request the entire $250 billion Europe committed to spending on energy be paid directly to the U.S. government as indemnification for noncompliance. Basically, you promised to buy $250 billion worth, you didn't, so now you owe us $250 billion.
Pay the cash instead of buying the energy.
Exactly. A direct transfer to the U.S. Treasury.
And if Europe is forced to pay this $250 billion annually as indemnification without receiving any actual energy or goods in return, the societal cost would be huge, right?
Immense and truly destabilizing. Tenenbaum starkly warns it would compel them to cut all social spending.
All of it. Healthcare, pensions.
These social programs, like healthcare, education, unemployment benefits, and pensions, are not just government expenditures. They are deeply valued by European citizens and are widely seen as crucial for maintaining social peace and stability within the Union.
Cutting those would cause chaos.
Widespread public discontent, internal strife, potentially fracturing the very cohesion of the EU. A drastic cut to these could be politically suicidal for European governments.
And Tenenbaum sees this potential outcome as aligning with Trump's larger goal.
Yes, aligning with Trump's larger overarching goal to consolidate the United States' position as an even greater magnet for global investment, for talent, and for business. It's about drawing capital, innovation, and people to the U.S., effectively reshaping the global economic landscape in America's favor.
This leads us into Tenenbaum's detailed analysis of the compounding economic squeeze on Europe.
Yeah, it's not just the tariffs, is it?
A multifaceted pressure that extends far beyond just these new tariffs. It highlights how several factors are converging to make European exports significantly less competitive.
That's right. Because on top of that 15% tariff on European goods, you have the powerful effect of the strong U.S. dollar.
The dollar's been very strong lately.
Very strong. Tenenbaum notes that the dollar has significantly strengthened recently, moving from around 104 or 105 against a basket of currencies in April to its current level of 118.
So what does that mean for European goods?
It means that European products are automatically an additional 18% more expensive for American buyers before the tariff is even applied.
18% from the currency plus 15% from the tariff.
Exactly. So when you combine the strong dollar and the new 15% tariffs, European goods are facing a formidable cumulative disadvantage, becoming vastly less competitive in the crucial U.S. market, over 30% combined hit.
Wow. That creates an incredibly challenging environment for European companies trying to sell in the U.S.
Incredibly challenging. Tenenbaum predicts that most European companies, perhaps with the rare exception of ultra-luxury brands like Ferrari that sell at extremely high margins and to a less price-sensitive clientele.
People buying Ferraris probably don't care about 15%.
Probably not. But most others will likely be forced to eat the 15% tariff themselves, absorbing it directly into their profit margins rather than passing it on to American consumers.
Why would they make such a tough decision, sacrificing their own profitability? Why not just raise prices?
Because if they do pass on that additional cost, American consumers will simply pivot to cheaper American-made goods or products from other regions that face lower tariffs or have weaker currencies, making them more competitive.
So they risk losing the market entirely.
Exactly. Tenenbaum emphasizes that losing market share in the U.S., once lost, is incredibly difficult and expensive to recover. So it becomes a strategic decision to maintain presence and market share, even at a significantly reduced profitability. Better to sell less profitably than not sell at all.
And the strategic absorption of tariffs will have ripple effects, right?
Inevitably. It will lead to reduced profitability across virtually all European companies exporting to the U.S., and lower corporate profits directly translate to less tax revenue for European governments.
Which brings us back to...
Brings Europe squarely back to the problem of a lack of funds for public services, potentially requiring further and deeper cuts, particularly in those politically sensitive social spending programs we discussed earlier. It's a compounding economic squeeze, a vicious cycle.
Let's talk about the key European export sectors that Tenenbaum identifies as being most profoundly affected by these changes. Cars must be high on the list.
Automobiles, absolutely. They represent the #1 export sector from Europe to the U.S., with iconic brands like BMW, Mercedes, and Porsche.
And they already face tough competition.
Intense global competition, including from increasingly sophisticated and cost-effective Chinese manufacturers that are even making inroads within Europe itself. The added cost burden will be significant for them.
What else? Germany sells a lot of machinery, right?
Germany, yes, a major global exporter of highly specialized machinery to the U.S., from industrial robots to precision tools. These complex machines are high-value exports that will now face this 15% tariff.
And luxury goods. France, Italy, Spain.
Big sector. Luxury goods constitute a significant portion of exports from countries like France. Think gourmet cheeses, fine wines, high-quality olive oil, and Spain, with its renowned wines and food products. These are all high-margin products, but even they will see their competitiveness eroded in the U.S. market.
And here's where it directly impacts many of our listeners. Pharmaceutical.
Yes, pharma. Tenenbaum identifies this as a particularly acute pain point within the agreement.
How does it work for drugs? Are they all tariffed?
He clarifies that generic medicines are generally exempt from U.S. tariffs,
Why? Because the U.S. needs cheap generics.
primarily because the U.S. needs these cost-effective alternatives for its healthcare system. However, non-generic, patented, and often higher-priced medicines will be subject to the 15% tariff.
The big moneymakers for the pharma companies.
Exactly. And the U.S., as Tenenbaum describes, has a brutal and highly competitive pharmaceutical industry, characterized by aggressive pricing and market dominance.
He gives an example, doesn't he? Novo Nordisk.
He cites the specific case of the Danish company Novo Nordisk, the maker of the immensely popular injection Ozempic,
Which is huge right now.
a company now valued more than the entire country of Denmark itself.
Yeah.
Novo Nordisk will be significantly hit by these tariffs on its patented drugs.
What's the impact?
They have already announced lower than expected profits due to the tariff burden and intense competition from U.S. pharmaceutical giants like Eli Lilly.
Who make competing drugs.
Exactly. Suggesting that they, like others, will likely have to swallow that 15% tariff themselves to remain competitive in the U.S. market.
And what about Switzerland in all of this? They
Yeah.
have big pharma companies like Roche, Novartis.
Good question. Tenenbaum notes that Switzerland, notably not an EU or NATO member, has a giant pharmaceutical industry. They are watching these developments very closely, of course.
But they're not facing the same pressure.
Currently, they face less direct pressure from the U.S., precisely because they don't rely on U.S. military defense in the same way as NATO countries. This underscores how deeply intertwined defense commitments are with trade concessions in this new environment.
Interesting link. Tenenbaum also mentions the huge price difference for drugs between the U.S. and Europe.
Yes, he highlights a historically significant price disparity. The same medicine can cost X in Europe and provocatively X 1,000 in the U.S.
1,000 times more. That seems exaggerated.
Well, maybe hyperbole, but the price difference is undeniably massive for many patented drugs. This led to what are known as gray markets, informal or unauthorized channels, where people would purchase cheaper European medicines and resell them in the U.S. for massive profit.
So what's the future pressure on European pharma?
The future pressure is clear. Major European pharmaceutical giants like Bayer, Sanofi, and Novartis will face significantly reduced profits on their patented drugs sold in the U.S. They might be forced to sell at dramatically lower U.S. prices to compete, or face crippling cumulative tariffs. Tenenbaum even speculates about 150% tariffs if the U.S. decides to escalate.
Which directly impacts what people pay for medications.
Exactly. It impacts what you, the listener, might pay for your medications and the entire global profitability structure of major pharmaceutical companies. It's a huge deal.
Okay, let's broaden our perspective now and connect this evolving trade dynamic to another massive global disruptor that Tenenbaum brings into the conversation. Artificial intelligence.
AI, yes. The other huge factor.
He predicts that within the next 3 years, the world as we know it will be vastly different due to the rapid advancement and deployment of AI.
Potentially replacing 50% of professional jobs across various sectors, he suggests.
50%, that's a dramatic prediction, and it affects entire economies.
Absolutely. This rapid ascent of AI presents a profound challenge for Europe, especially given its current position in the global AI landscape.
Why is it such a challenge for Europe specifically?
Tenenbaum emphasizes that access to American AI technology, which is currently leading the world, will absolutely not be free for Europe.
Meaning they'll have to pay or make concessions.
Not only licensing fees and proprietary software costs, but potentially also demands for data sharing, strategic alignment, or even direct investment in U.S. AI firms.
And AI needs massive infrastructure, right? Data centers.
Exactly. AI requires immense computing power, demanding vast data centers. OpenAI, for instance, recently announced a large data center investment in Norway.
Which is NATO but not EU. Interesting.
Right. To attract similar cutting-edge data centers and secure their AI future, Europe will have to actively compete, potentially by gifting energy or offering highly subsidized power.
Gifting energy, the same energy the U.S. wants to sell them.
Ironically, yes, the very same energy the U.S. wants to sell them at a premium. It highlights the complex web of dependencies.
And here's where Tenenbaum offers a particularly provocative and, frankly, quite insightful observation about the societal implications of AI.
Yeah, his comment about AI solving problems with people.
He suggests that AI will effectively solve many problems with people for governments and corporations. Think about it. Unlike human workers, AI.
Doesn't bring tractors to the city to protest against new regulations or trade deals. His words.
Right. It works 24/7 without needing breaks or unions. It doesn't go on 6-week vacations or demand higher wages.
And crucially, for a multilingual EU with 22 official languages among its 27 countries, AI doesn't speak strange languages or require costly translation.
It's a stark, perhaps unsettling, but undeniably thought-provoking observation on the drive for efficiency and control in a complex world.
It's a compelling, if somewhat chilling, perspective that certainly highlights the competitive pressures Europe faces on multiple fronts: economic, technological, and even societal.
Now, let's shift to the immediate practicalities of the agreement's implementation. Are those tariffs happening now?
Tenenbaum clarifies that the 15% tariffs on European exports to the U.S. are already being collected.
Already. So the U.S. is getting that money now.
Yes. They were initially set at 30%, but were lowered to 15% after the agreement was made, providing a tangible, immediate benefit to the U.S. Treasury. That revenue stream for the U.S. is immediate.
But the other major commitments, the energy purchases, the investments, those aren't immediate.
No, those have much longer implementation periods. No one realistically expects Europe to immediately start buying $250 billion in energy or to invest $750 billion overnight. There's a ticking clock for these, but it's a longer one, allowing for more strategic maneuvering and potentially non-compliance from Europe.
Which is why Tenenbaum predicts future conflict over those.
Exactly. And here's where Tenenbaum expresses skepticism about official U.S. economic data.
Oh. What's his issue with the data?
He notes that the U.S. recently announced a robust 3% annual GDP growth rate, a figure touted by Trump as a great achievement.
3% sounds pretty good.
However, Tenenbaum asserts this figure is lying.
Lying. Strong word again.
Because GDP growth calculations do not factor in imports. He argues that with significant import reductions due to these tariffs, the stated growth rate is inflated and the real underlying growth in domestic production might be lower than suggested.
So imports go down, GDP looks better, even if the economy isn't really growing that much faster.
That's his argument. What's particularly significant here is that despite potentially reduced imports, the U.S. government's revenue has significantly increased precisely because of the tariffs being collected on those remaining imports.
So the Treasury is making more money, even if the overall trade volume shrinks.
Correct. It's a direct financial gain for the U.S. Treasury, regardless of the headline GDP number.
This brings us to what Tenenbaum views as Trump's unique and highly effective geopolitical leverage through tariffs.
Yeah, he sees Trump as using tariffs in a novel way.
He highlights Trump as truly the first modern leader to effectively combine economic sanctions, specifically tariffs, with broader geopolitical objectives. He's turned tariffs into a potent and flexible tool of foreign policy, far beyond mere trade disputes.
And this approach has been applied broadly, not just to Europe, right?
Tenenbaum provides several examples. The U.S. recently forged a new trade deal with South Korea, indicating a different negotiation outcome there.
Okay, so deals are still possible.
But conversely, India, a growing economic power, was specifically punished by the U.S. through tariff actions. Brazil, as we discussed at the top of this deep dive, faced crippling 50% tariffs on meat,
Which basically stopped those imports.
effectively bringing Brazilian meat imports to the U.S. to a halt. He even recounts a fascinating anecdote.
The Cambodia-Thailand one.
Yes, where Trump purportedly brokered a ceasefire between Cambodia and Thailand by threatening a massive 50% tariff if they remained at war, then offering a reduction if peace was achieved.
Using tariffs for conflict resolution. Wow.
It demonstrates the direct, immediate leverage tariffs provide in this view.
And there was that funny story about Iran, too.
And here's a truly humorous anecdote from Tenenbaum.
Hmm.
He recounted how Iran's foreign minister, seeking to negotiate, actually demanded indemnities from the U.S. before talks could even begin.
Demanded money from the U.S. first.
A situation Tenenbaum humorously described as the U.S. looking for the checkbook. This anecdote vividly illustrates how effective this tariff geopolitical strategy has been, according to Tenenbaum, leading to immense revenue collection for the U.S. government and forcing concessions from various nations around the globe.
It's a playbook that, he argues, has consistently delivered results for the U.S., financially and geopolitically.
But despite the signed agreement, Tenenbaum identifies a major potential flashpoint looming for Europe, one that could unravel the entire deal.
The agricultural showdown.
The agricultural showdown. The U.S. is absolutely insistent that Europe fully open its markets to U.S. agricultural products, and the agreement explicitly includes this commitment from Europe.
And Tenenbaum sees this as a major potential failure point for the entire accord. Why?
Because farmers in France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and even Spain wield enormous political and parliamentary influence within their respective countries.
Farmers are a powerful lobby in Europe. Always have been.
A powerful, organized lobby that can bring governments to a halt, block roads, protest. They have real clout.
And here's the terrifying domino effect of a no vote on this specific agricultural issue.
What happens if, say, France says no because of its farmers?
If just one country, like France, refuses to ratify the agreement due to its powerful agricultural lobby, perhaps fearing an influx of cheaper U.S. products, the entire agreement collapses.
The whole thing falls apart.
The whole thing. And if that happens, Tenenbaum warns all European countries would face a much higher, across-the-board 30% tariff on all their exports to the U.S.
30%. That's way worse than the current 15%.
A far more punishing scenario than the current 15%. So the pressure on France, or whoever might object, will be immense from other EU members.
This situation could lead to severe and unprecedented internal conflict within the EU then.
Absolutely. Countries like Germany, whose industrial exports rely heavily on U.S. markets, could potentially sanction or pressure France, arguing that its refusal to ratify is harming the entire bloc.
Infighting within the EU.
Tenenbaum even suggests this scenario risks destroying much of the market for European agriculture internally, as other EU members might retaliate against the holdout.
Why is U.S. agriculture such a threat to European farmers?
The fundamental issue is that U.S. agriculture is infinitely cheaper, as Tenenbaum puts it.
Infinitely.
Well, vastly cheaper due to its massive scale, highly mechanized farming practices, and significantly fewer bureaucratic regulations compared to Europe's intensive, often heavily subsidized farming.
Like that 75% subsidy for Spanish wheat you mentioned.
Exactly, like the 75% subsidy for Spanish wheat he cites. The U.S. naturally demands an end to these subsidies and regulatory barriers as part of opening markets.
So Tenenbaum believes these agricultural issues will cause big headaches for Europe.
Big headaches and deep internal strife for Europe, potentially even leading to a dramatic scenario where a country like Belgium might be effectively told to leave the EU if it pushes too hard and jeopardizes the entire bloc's access to the U.S. market.
Told to leave the EU. That's extreme.
It highlights the potential for internal fractures. It's an internal battleground waiting to explode, with high stakes for European unity.
Okay, so looking bigger picture, what is Trump's medium-term vision and overarching strategy behind all these moves, according to Tenenbaum?
Tenenbaum suggests his core idea is simply to extract everything he can from Europe in the shortest possible time frame.
Just extract value.
He operates from the belief that the U.S. has historically paid too much to support Europe, both economically and militarily, and now, in his view, everyone has to pay their fair share and maybe more. It's a reckoning, as he sees it.
And his negotiation strategy seems clearly established now.
Yes. He negotiates a deal, reaches an agreement, waits to see if it's not fully met or complied with.
Like the energy commitment.
Exactly. And then renegotiates with even greater force and higher demands. It's a relentless, continuous cycle of leverage and re-leverage designed to maximize gains over time.
And this entire discussion is also deeply intertwined with NATO, right?
Absolutely. NATO comprises most of Europe, with notable exceptions like Switzerland, alongside Canada and the U.S.
And the pressure on defense spending continues.
There's ongoing escalating pressure for NATO members to meet their defense spending target of 5% of GDP.
5%? I thought it was 2%.
The target has effectively been raised in discussions, reflecting the increased threat perception. Tenenbaum warns that if Russia's aggression continues to escalate, this target could realistically rise to 10% of GDP for defense spending,
10% of GDP on defense.
which would almost certainly mean goodbye social spending for many European nations, forcing them to make impossible choices between security and their cherished welfare states.
Wow. So we've taken a really deep dive into the new U.S.-Europe trade agreement, examining it through the incredibly insightful lens of Mookie Tenenbaum's astute observations.
It's certainly a complex picture he paints.
What emerges is not just a commercial deal, is it? It's a profound and intentional shift in global power dynamics.
Deeply rooted in historical concessions and driven by calculated economic and geopolitical leverage. It's a testament to how seemingly dry technical trade agreements are, in fact, front lines,
Background.
where national vulnerabilities, stark economic realities, and even the future of social welfare are fiercely debated and ultimately decided.
We've seen how the U.S. is leveraging its strengths from its indispensable defense umbrella to its dominance in cutting-edge artificial intelligence to the sheer gravitational pull of its massive market access
Using every tool in the toolbox.
to reshape alliances, redirect financial flows, and reestablish a more favorable balance of power in its favor. It's a calculated strategy with wide-ranging implications.
Absolutely.
And here's a provocative thought for you to chew on as you go about your day. If, as Tenenbaum suggests, this agreement forces European nations to deeply reevaluate their fundamental needs for defense, their economic access, and their technological independence.
A fundamental rethink.
What does that mean for the future of multilateralism? Will we see a world of increasingly self-interested, perhaps even fractured trade blocs? Or will new forms of cooperation born out of these intense pressures ultimately emerge?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it?
What stands out to you as the most significant ripple effect of this unilateral menu that Europe has been presented with? Lots to think about there.
Indeed. The world of international relations is certainly a constantly evolving landscape, always presenting us with endless, fascinating topics to deep dive into.
Absolutely. Join us next time for another deep dive into the most pressing and intriguing global issues.